Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Hope you guys are enjoying the show thus far. Thank you all for your comments. Shout out to Sticker, my fellow Seahawks fan. Thank you for subbing and liking to the show. Thank you as well for all those who've commented about their fantasy teams or left comments in general. I want to keep this going. I want to keep the show as interactive as possible. But let us transition kind of from our little deep dives around the league before the start of the season to our last of the sleepers and bust segments. We are still going to go into the tight end sleepers. We get another comment from Shep Easy Sweet Spot as he gives his fantasy team, and Team Money has entered the chat, one of my favorite subscribers. I drafted in my big money league $200. Let's do this. 2 fantasy teams. Let's start off with Shep Easy's. We'll get yours, Team Money, in a little bit. We have Josh Allen, Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, Mark Andrews, Saquon Barkley, Drake London, Aaron Jones, Cleveland defense, Cameron Dicker the kicker, shout out Dicker the kicker from Texas, and Ladd McConkey. My thoughts on this lineup. I think that this lineup might be more valued in terms of your skill positions than most. I really like Mark Andrews still as a tight end. Let's hope that his injury history is not bad and doesn't continue on to the season, because he is someone I really like in that Ravens offense. Perhaps going to receive at least the second most targets in that Ravens offense than Devontae Adams, like I mentioned. That tension is there with the Las Vegas Raiders. Hopefully it goes away. Hopefully he's there for the long run. But if he is, he definitely adds that. But inconsistent QB play could hold him back. Justin Jefferson as well. No, if you are my dad, he's a huge Vikings fan. Justin Jefferson, everyone loves Justin Jefferson. Perhaps profiling as the wide receiver 3 overall in fantasy football. That connection is, again, if Sam Darnold really is who the Vikings think he is, then maybe that connection is going to stick. And then I like the Cleveland D. I have them myself. They're the number 1 defense in the league, and in fantasy, can't go wrong with them. Ladd McConkey, I believe, off your bench. I think he's going to have a lot of upside. I think he's going a little bit under the radar. I think his intelligence will help him in this Chargers offense. We're going to have to see how many targets he gets because of that run-heavy philosophy and that run-heavy system in LA, like I talked about when I talked about the Chargers running back room. But overall, this team is deep. I like Aaron Jones as well. Maybe lay off the Vikings players a little bit. And Saquon as well, Drake London. So overall, I would give this team a solid A- as well. A lot of upside here, but a lot of talent in the receiver position that really needs to rely on the QBs a lot. That's my only worry. If the QBs don't play up to par, then who knows how these receivers will look. But just on paper, this profile is a very solid fantasy team. Let's go to one of my favorite subscribers, favorite commenters for the show, Team Money, 10-man PPR League. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Jacobs, James Conner, CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Dalton Kincaid, DK, Worthy, and Ridley. Did I cook? I think you did. Patrick Mahomes, number 1 QB. That's as simple as that. Always going to be the number 1 QB in fantasy for however long he plays, for however long as the Chiefs keep supplementing him with players who like him. And then that little stack that you did there with Xavier Worthy, I believe, coming off your bench. I think he's going to be fantastic. Seeing him as a Texas fan coming out of Texas really adds a lot of value as a gadget guy. Can return punts, can go long, run routes. He's not just all about speed, so he's an exciting player off the bench. DK, I talked about him a little bit. Can't go wrong with him. Always in that wide receiver 15 to 20 range, like I said. I think that this is going to be another fantastic year for him. A lot of power, unexpected abilities at the wide receiver position. Dalton Kincaid, talked about him as well. I personally love him. I personally think that he will finish at the very least as a tight end 5 in fantasy. He sits right in that conversation with guys like Laporta, Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, as one of those guys who wants to break into that top 5. And then Jacobs and Conner, very interesting running back. We talked about James Conner a lot last week in terms of what he brings to the table, especially what with Kyler Murray healthy as well. I would love to see what that backfield looks like. And then Josh Jacobs making the move to the Packers. I'm a little bit skeptical about him to see what he looks like moving to a new team. Didn't have the best of endings in Las Vegas as someone that Antonio Pierce reportedly wanted to build around actually on offense. But moving to Green Bay, let's see how he fits into that team. I think that they are going to be a pass-first system. They have a lot of young wide receiver talent. But I think that Josh Jacobs, you can't necessarily fault him for any of the deficiencies he's seen. A new setting for him could be exactly what he needed. So I did think you cook. I think that this might be perhaps the best team of the day. I like it's well-rounded at the wide receiver position. A lot of high upside at the running back position. Perhaps the best QB in fantasy football right now. And a solid supplementary bench with some high upside wide receivers. So I think that you have nailed it. You did, in fact, cook Team Money. Thank you again for your comments. One of my favorite commenters. Keep the comments coming. But we got to get into this fourth segment of today's show a little bit, talking about some of the tight end sleepers that I'm really excited about. All of these guys, profiling these guys who are really exciting. Maybe you should keep an eye out for in the draft. So without further ado, let's jump right into them, starting off with a guy who really should see his numbers pop with the addition of Kirk Cousins as his QB, and that is Kyle Pitts. I really think the value with Kyle Pitts lays in his upside. I think that Kyle Pitts, yes, a lot of people were skeptical of him going forth overall a couple of years ago, but he still has a lot of upside in terms of the value he brings to a team in his youth and his physicality at the tight end position. I still think he has the necessary traits, maybe not to break into the top 5 for now, but maybe the top 10 this year. I think that the new OC in Zach Robinson, there might be an increase in 11 personnel, a lot more opportunities to align wherever and really create mismatches will arise for Kyle Pitts. He was a tight end 13 last year. That stands for something with you guys. He only did have 149 catches though, so a higher volume of targets could be in the cards this year for Kyle Pitts. He does have the touchdown production. He did have 6 touchdowns last year, so that's not a concern. So it's all about finding that connection with Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins is someone who adds a lot of upside here. Now, the next guy really is going to vary on how his QB plays and if he can connect with him early on, because he is definitely someone who I really like, but it's going to come down to the rapport he develops with Deshaun Watson, and that is David Njoku. Oh, not David Njoku just yet, but we will go to him now that I mentioned him. Let's talk about his stats last year with Deshaun Watson and with Joe Flacco, because there is a heavy variation there. Weeks 14 through 17 with Joe Flacco, with the Browns running back. He had 2 games of 26 or more fantasy points, 1 TD at the very least in 3 of those 4 games. Only 3 games overall of double-digit fantasy points did David Njoku have with Deshaun Watson as his QB. So make of that what you will. That being said, I certainly think that he's the best receiving option even for the Cleveland Browns. Like I said, as much as I still think that Amari Cooper could have some value, still be a consistent 1,000-yard receiver, he is getting up there in age. They were maybe talking about trading him away, but with the whole Brandon Ayuk situation, we're willing to bring in Ayuk and let go of him. So that goes to show that they may not trust him as much. And then you bring in a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who really did not stand out in, I believe, 2 or 3 years with the Denver Broncos. And Elijah Moore, I like him as a route runner, but I don't like him as someone who I can place my trust in as a wide receiver. And so that just leaves David Njoku as perhaps the best receiving option in this. So look for Kevin Stefanski to try and implement some of the things that made Baker Mayfield effective in this offense with this offense. That's what I've always wanted, for the Browns to either have kept Baker Mayfield in the first place or at least implement some of the things that Baker Mayfield loved to do in that system with Deshaun Watson, because that's basically what Deshaun Watson's best traits are. Escaping the pocket, creating something with his legs, or even running to pass the football. That will open up a lot more avenues for this offense. So David Njoku could be boom, could be bust. We saw it last year in his stats when Deshaun Watson did start that he was more of a bust. But I think this year in the Cleveland Browns offense that really doesn't have much excitement and hype surrounding them outside of, guys like Jerome Ford, who could have a bigger role in this offense, and a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who I really don't have the highest of expectations for. David Njoku could be the face of the Browns receiving game this year. And the last guy, perhaps the biggest red zone threat out of all the tight ends on the market, perhaps the guy who's going to get a lot of red zone targets, maybe the most exciting guy in PPR terms for all of those PPR players out there, Jake Ferguson. Let's go back to him. Jake Ferguson was 9th in receptions last year amongst all tight ends, 8th in receiving yards. Only 6 tight ends had more than 5 TDs. That just speaks to the volume of targets that Jake Ferguson gets, and speaks to where he gets them specifically. Because not only does Jake Ferguson present this physicality and versatility, he presents it in red zone areas, presents it in terms of his touchdown production. He presents it in terms of overall Cowboys offense outlook as well. Who outside of CeeDee Lamb is willing to step up in the system? Brandon Cooks, an aging Brandon Cooks? I don't think so. I think it's Jake Ferguson. I think that they're lucky to have him for now on a very team-friendly contract. He will get more expensive as years go on. They should look to tie him down, much like they did CeeDee Lamb in the future. I know he's not the main concern in this Cowboys offense in terms of contract situations, but he is someone who, outside of CeeDee Lamb, might be the Cowboys' best receiving option as well, especially in the red zone because of his physical presence. But you can't necessarily go wrong with many tight ends here, I would say, because in terms of the tight end market, and we will get into busts next, I think that we think of the tight ends as who I'm going to talk about in terms of busts as players who just have a lot riding on the season. It's not necessarily, he's going to outright fall flat on his face this season. I think this is all about, playing the chess game that is fantasy football, because, like I said, you're going to start thinking about age being a concern amongst tight ends in the future when your Kelce's and Kittles start to get up there in age. Now, more than ever, the tight end market is a deeper pool to choose from, so you're going to jump to more conclusions about certain players than you might have before. You might jump the gun a little bit in terms of how you think. These tight end sleepers might not even project to be top 10 tight ends in about 3 to 4 years. This is just projection because of the depth of the tight end market. But that being said, these 3 guys probably are exciting in terms of how they'll profile into the offenses right now. I'm more concerned about, how the tight end market might not make them as high profile because of the fact that it's so deep. Because these guys, maybe in a different circumstance, would be, in my humble opinion, top 5 guys year in, year out. But that just shows the volatility of the position. This should just about do it. Thank you yet again for all your comments, especially from Team Money and Shabizi Sweet Spots. Coming up next on the show to conclude today's show, we talk about, like I said, tight end busts, potential tight end busts. We'll be right back after this short break.